Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. Welcome to today's webinar, Understanding Tax Compliance for Shopify Users. My name is Courtney. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar, and we are doing a deep dive into the key tax challenges for e-commerce sellers and how sales tax automation can help you streamline it. And like I said, we are looking specifically at Shopify. So if you're using Shopify, you are in the right place today. Before we dive in, though, just a couple of quick housekeeping items I wanted to cover. So, friendly reminder that here at Avalara, we cannot provide legal tax advice. So, everything we discuss today is for informational and educational purposes only. But as always, if you have questions, feel free to enter those, and we will do our best to answer those as thoroughly as we can. And then on your screen now is our safe harbor policy. So take a moment to review this, and I'm going to continue talking about some additional housekeeping items. So if you are listening today and would like to listen to the webinar again, or even share it with your colleagues, we are recording the webinar. So we'll send out a link to that within the next 24 hours, and you'll have access to the same console that you're looking at now. Speaking of the console, it can be customized, so those windows that you see can be moved around or resized according to your liking. And I also wanted to specifically call out a couple of the windows. So first, over on the left-hand side is the Q&A chat box. Feel free to use that while we're live on today's webinar to submit any questions that you have. Like I said, we can't provide legal tax advice, but we do our best to give you some general information. And then we also have some additional resources on the right of the console. That's where you can actually access today's slides if you'd like to save them for later or just get a sneak peek of what we're going to be talking about. And then we also have some other related resources there on tax compliance and things to keep in mind. Just a quick note, this console will disappear once the live event is over. So make sure if you click on those over the next, while we're live, and they'll be open up in a new tab and be waiting for you once the webinar is over. And then also down at the bottom, if you have any technical issues, do feel free to submit a question in that Ask a Question box. Or there's also a question mark icon down at the very bottom, and you can click on that to see some answers to frequently asked questions about logistics and technicalities there. All right, so let's dive in and meet our speakers today. So first off, we have Patrick New. He is a director of our strategic partnerships at Avalara, one of my colleagues. So Patrick, let me pass it over to you and have you do a quick introduction.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. So again, Patrick New, I manage our Shopify partnership here at Avalara. I'm coming up on my 12th year at Avalara, so I've got over a decade of tax experience. And I've had the privilege for the last several years of working directly with our e-commerce partners and customers, specifically on the Shopify partnership. So excited to be here and talk about this new app that we're launching.
Awesome. Thanks, Patrick. And next up, we have Megan Manning. She is a senior partnerships manager over at Shopify. So we have someone from Avalara and someone at Shopify to talk to you about tax compliance. Megan, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Courtney. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan. I'm a senior partnerships manager at Shopify, overseeing our tax product partnerships. I've been with Shopify about a year and a half, and prior to that, I have 11 years of indirect tax experience across compliance, planning, product, and now partnerships. Excited to be here today.
Great. Thanks so much, Megan. All right, well, we are ready to take a dive into the content. So Patrick, I'm gonna pass the mic over to you to talk about our key takeaways today.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks, Courtney. So we'll just start off with some of the basic challenges that e-commerce sellers face today. I want to give you guys kind of the context of the problem that we're trying to solve here. We'll go into how using software to automate those, your sales tax compliance can help benefit merchants like you all. We'll go into some of the specifics of the Shopify and the new app that Avalara has developed for it, some of the benefits that new integration and app provide, and some of the features and functionality that we've recently released. And then lastly, we'll go through simply how to find it, how to purchase and install the app if that's something you're interested in. So those are the key takeaways, and we'll dive right in. All right, so first off, what are the challenges? And ultimately, this is a global problem. There is sales tax in the US, we have VAT, GST, basically a variety of taxes, indirect taxes across the globe. We'll focus on some key areas today, mainly the US and EMEA, where we have the bigger challenges when it comes to indirect tax. But just know that this is a global problem, and that Avalara and Shopify are helping merchants solve these problems globally. So where we will start, and where we kind of always have to start when it comes to tax compliance, is around Nexus. It's maybe not the most exciting part of tax compliance, but we start there because it really is the top of the decision tree around whether or not and how big of a challenge you're going to have when it comes to tax compliance. And what Nexus is at the simplest level, it's an obligation, it's a connection to a state or a jurisdiction, that could be another country or even a local jurisdiction, to collect and remit taxes in that place. Historically, this has been a really complicated question. It goes back to business activities, where you have employees, where you have contractors, whether you're visiting other states to install, to perform business activities. But it got a little simpler about 6 years ago with a Supreme Court case called South Dakota versus Wayfair. And ultimately, this case set the precedent for something called economic nexus here in the US. It's a concept that's been pretty widespread globally, but in the last 6 years, South Dakota was the first to adopt an economic nexus law, and then just about every state rapidly followed them. But ultimately what it means, it's not necessarily based on your business activities, but your sales into states. And if you reach one of these thresholds, you have nexus in that state, and you are obligated to collect and remit there. And you can kind of see in this map the different thresholds that we see. But the simplest one I'll take, where we're headquartered up in the state of Washington. If you sell more than $100,000 into that state, you meet that threshold, and you are obligated to collect and remit taxes there. So every business has to first go through this exercise to figure out, hey, where do I have nexus? Where do I have the requirement to collect and remit taxes? The good news is the process of identifying that with economic nexus has become simpler for businesses. It's much less complicated. However, with economic nexus laws, that does mean for a lot of online retailers that their nexus footprint is much larger than it would have been previously. So it's not, it's not something that every company has to deal with when it comes to, expanding their footprint. If you're a smaller retailer and you're under these thresholds, you might still be looking at some of those other business activities that drive your nexus footprint. But for a lot of customers, this is really the simplest place to start to figure out, hey, where are my obligations, and how big of an issue do I have when it comes to tax compliance? Both Avalara and Shopify have tools, depending on where you do your reporting, to help monitor these thresholds. So if you're using our software and you are hitting these thresholds, we both have a tool to give you notifications. So we'll help you out and tell you a little bit more about how that works. But ultimately, this is step one in any customer's tax compliance journey, figuring out where you have to collect and remit. Then it comes to charging tax, right? As a seller, as a merchant, you are obligated to accurately charge tax to your customers. And there's a variety of things that go into that. The main one of the first ones, is figuring out what rate to charge. So you can imagine this state map, or this map of the US here with states. There are over 12,000 jurisdictions. So it gets much more granular and much more difficult when you start to actually sell across the country. And each of these states, some just have state level taxes, but many have county level taxes, city level taxes, special tax jurisdictions that all roll up into figuring out, hey, what rate do I have to charge at that specific location that I'm selling to? So that's one of the first challenges. One of the larger challenges that e-commerce merchants run into is product taxability. So this is where we'll take a little moment and just run through some of these crazy tax laws, some of these weird scenarios that we've seen and that Avalara tracks, and we make sure that we have all these research and data built out on our side so our customers don't have to. But these are the types of things that we see. So I'll just highlight a couple examples here. I think the takeout scenario in Colorado is great. Colorado has an exemption for food and for things that are sold with to-go foods. That exemption includes cups and lids to cups, but it does not include straws. So if you're buying a coffee and it's a hot coffee and it just has a cup and a lid, that is exempt from tax. But if you get an iced coffee and it has a straw in it, you have to charge tax on the straw. Another great example is Maryland has a threshold on an exemption for the size of ice cream that you sell. Anything above 16 ounces is exempt from tax. While Ben & Jerry's has a standard pint, so they're tax-free. Haagen-Dazs is slightly less than that, so they are taxable. So again, just one of those things. And if you're selling ice cream, this can be a big difference on whether or not your products are taxable or not. And one of my favorite ones here is powdered drinks in New York. New York has an exemption, or it has tax on any powdered drink that you sell there, with an exemption specifically for Tang. Why? No one knows. The state of New York just has a preference for Tang, but if you're selling Kool-Aid or powdered Gatorade or something else, it is taxable. If it's specifically Tang, you are exempt. So you get the idea. These are just some of kind of the weird tax laws that we see out there, but every state has them. They don't always make sense. They're complicated, but Avalara knows. We have all the research behind it to know whether these things are taxable or not. I'll call out that specifically for online retailers, there's a few industries that we see that have more complexity around product taxability. Apparel is one of those key things. There's some really interesting threshold rules in New York and other areas where selling clothes can be taxed differently. And that's one of those main industries that we see a lot of customers have complexities around product taxability. So in the grand scheme of, it's not just figuring out the right rate and the right tax. There's a bunch of other things that go into solving your sales tax challenges. Ultimately, getting these things done properly. We'll talk a bit about managing exempt sales here in a minute as a new feature of our new app. But there's a variety of things that you have to take into consideration, not just, figuring out your nexus and how your products are taxable. You've got to think about whether your customers are taxable. You've got to make sure that you're calculating tax correctly. We'll focus a lot on that. That is the essence of the new app that we've built with Shopify. And then ultimately, you have to file and remit that tax back to the government agencies. So we'll talk a bit about this sort of the journey that every customer has to take for tax compliance, but these are the basic steps. The first one we talked about, which is Nexus, understanding where you need to collect and remit tax. Then you got to go get registered there if you're not. That's a step that Avalara can help you with, or you can work through that on your own or with the CPA, but you have to be registered. It's very important that you are registered in a state before you start collecting tax. It's a big no-no. And then we get into calculating tax accurately. And that's really the crux of what the new Avalara for Shopify app does. And making sure that you have the right rates, you're using the proper product taxability, and any other logic or rules that apply when it comes to calculating tax so that you do it accurately. You've then got to track and manage that. So whether you have exempt customers that you may be charging no tax to, you still have to collect exemption certificates to prove that later on. And then the last step is filing and remitting those taxes back to the different government agencies. So that's the journey that every customer must take. Avalara has different services to help along the way. And like I said, today we'll really just focus on the calculation portion and the AvaTax bit, but we'll touch on some of the other stuff as well. All right. So big picture, that is the challenge. But just real quickly at a high level, what does automating sales tax provide for businesses? And the two main things are we're going to reduce risk and we're going to drive business efficiencies. Now, reducing audit risk is important. Tax is something every business has to do. It's not something you can ignore. As you grow, your audit risk grows with you. And if you ignore it, you can be charged not only the find in an audit, not only for the taxes that you should have collected, but interest and penalties on top of that. So we've got a quote here that's more about efficiencies, but we have others from a lot of CFOs and CEOs that are just basically around having Avalara and having sales tax automation reducing their risk provides that peace of mind, allows the CFO to sleep better at night. And ultimately, this isn't, it's not going to make money for your business in this capacity, but it will reduce your risk. Where we can help drive, efficiencies in the business is where you have a need to handle your tax compliance. There's a couple ways to do it. Obviously, we recommend you do it with software. But a lot of people starting out, they're just using human headcount and they're trying to get it done with their controller or their CFO is even doing it. And ultimately that takes time, it takes energy. And as you start to grow, this is where using software to automate your tax compliance can really drive those efficiencies. And that's where you see the quote here on the right, where we have a CFO that says saving probably $300,000 a year. That's because he's got to the point where he has multiple headcount that he needs to manage his sales tax compliance. And it's gotten to the point where, hey, using software to automate it makes the most sense. So those are really the two key factors. Let's see. I will just touch on this briefly. This is a Forrester study that was done on Avalara a few years back. This is essentially a larger mid-market business, but I'll let you all read through some of the numbers here. I'm not going to read them all out, but ultimately it's the idea that we are saving time, we're therefore saving money, and you're getting a quick and easy return on your investment by automating your tax compliance with software like Avalara. Okay. So that's the high level of the challenge and kind of what automating software can bring you when you're doing it through companies like Avalara. But let's touch a little bit more specifically on the new Shopify tax platform and our new app. And with that, I'll hand it over to Megan Manning for a bit. Megan, thanks again for joining us today. Really appreciate you being here. You want to tell us a bit about Shopify tax platform and why you guys built it out?
Sure do. Yes, so Avalara has a new app on the tax platform. And perhaps you're wondering, well, what in the world is the tax platform? So we built the tax platform essentially to be a standardized API that allows third-party providers to easily integrate and to be able to calculate taxes during checkout. So perhaps you're familiar with the App Store, where there's a whole ecosystem of apps. The limitation there is that those apps cannot actually inject tax calculations to be processed during checkout. So the tax platform is the answer to that. And why we built it was Shopify has other tax solutions such as Shopify Tax, the legacy Avalara app for Plus merchants. But we recognize that those apps may not be meeting the needs of all merchants. So we wanted to open the platform up to all merchants of any plan type and allow them, the agency, to select the provider that's needed, which we view as especially important as merchants grow and maybe expand globally if you're selling into niche verticals. So really boils down to agency for merchants.
That's great. And Avalara is really excited to be working with this on you guys. We've worked with you on different projects in tax compliance for over 9 years now, but it's really great that we can build out this expanded functionality, expanded features, and make it available to really, as you mentioned, any size merchant that has tax complexity needs for a third-party service provider like ourselves. So we're really excited to be part of this. Few key things about this new integration: it's built and sold by Avalara. So Avalara owns the app development. If there is support questions or feedback, you can bring that directly to Avalara. And if there's feature requests, we work on those, and we work very closely with Shopify to collaborate to build out new features and functionalities here. Again, it's available to all versions of Shopify. Historically, we've had some availability for Plus merchants to use AvaTax, but now It's available to all plan types, as Megan has mentioned. And yeah, this is going to be the app of the future, so to speak. This is where we're putting all our development efforts, and any new features and functionalities will be rolled out here. So it's future-proof from a development standpoint. So just a bit more on specifically what this app will help with. Again, seamlessly integrates. It's built into the Shopify admin. You'll find it under taxes and settings. We'll show you more on where to do that later. Again, driving business efficiencies. Okay, here's my quote about getting more sleep, which is important to me as having young kids. But yeah, this is where we drive efficiencies, reduce your risk, stay compliant, and again, we're scalable. This is something that is, works for merchants of all sizes, and really just depends on their tax complexities. We see small businesses that have the same complexities that Fortune 1000 companies have when it comes to tax compliance. So it really is a good fit for any size company. And again, Avalara and Shopify have a history of working together, and we're really excited to take this next step. So I'll touch on a couple of the specific new features that we have in our app. Again, this is on top of all the standard functionality that everyone knows Avalara can provide around accurate tax calculation, but these are some of the new features that are specific to the new Avalara for Shopify integration. We've taken a big leap forward in handling refunds and exchanges. This is a pain point for a lot of merchants, especially those with retail storefronts. It's not always the case where if you have a return or exchange, it's a simple credit. A lot of times a new tax calculation has to take place, and we're making sure we're handling those accurately right now as well. We have the ability to sync your products directly from your Shopify store. So product taxability, that problem is taken care of on the Avalara side with mapping to our tax codes. These codes have all the rules and research and logic for handling that correctly. So we have a simple tool that will sync in your products and help you map them to our tax codes to handle that piece. And then two other new features that we're really excited about. We've integrated our exemption certificate managed functionality directly into the app. So that's for customers who are merchants who are selling to customers that are exempt. That can be a variety of reasons. The most common one is resale in a B2B transaction. If you're selling something to a customer who's then going to resell that product, they will provide you an exemption certificate, and you shouldn't charge them tax. Avalara has an exemption certificate management product that's a standalone product, but we've integrated that functionality directly into the new app so that customers, buyers who are coming through the process that might be exempt and see tax, they now have the ability to go submit a certificate to the merchant, have that validated, put on record, and then proceed through the checkout without having tax charged. So really making it streamless for those B2B customers as well. And then lastly, as we expand into kind of the global conversation, we have enhanced VAT calculation in the new integration as well. And specifically, this allows us to handle B2B VAT transactions. So the new app can handle, we're passing along the VAT identification number, the buyer ID for those merchants, and that allows us to handle B2B VAT transactions, as well as other enhanced VAT calculations. So some of the new features that we're excited about, and again, this will continue to grow. We just launched the app back here in May, and as time progresses, we'll be adding new and more features and working closely with Shopify to make sure that we have as many and all use cases addressed for our customer base. All right. So with that, we'll touch a little bit on how to find it, how to purchase, if this is of interest to you. So the first thing we should call out, which Megan mentioned, this is not your traditional App Store app. This is found in admin. So you can go into Shopify. If you click on your settings on the left side, you have your panel, and under taxes and duties, that's where you will find this particular application. It is a paid application. So there, you can install the app, but you'll hit a paywall. So step one is getting in touch with Avalara. Reach out to us. We'll have a conversation about your requirements and your needs. and you'll need to purchase a service plan from us. Once you've done that, you can go into Shopify, install the app, and it's very straightforward from there. If you're already an Avalara customer, it's simply connecting your store to it and saving your configurations, and then you're ready to go back to Shopify and activate the app and start charging tax on your charging tax in checkout. If you're new to Avalara, you'll want to set up your tax profile on our side. So same process, but a few extra steps, setting up your tax profile, which is very straightforward. Again, we need to know where you're collecting tax. So where do you have nexus? Come through, check some boxes, tell us that. Who you're selling to, we want to make sure we keep track of any of those exempt customers so we don't charge them tax in that case. And ultimately, what are you selling? So mapping those products to our tax codes to make sure we get the product taxability right. So that's kind of the onboarding process for Avalara. And then again, simply save your configuration, install the app, and activate it in Shopify, and you're ready to start calculating sales tax in checkout. All right. So yeah, lastly, step one, get in touch with Avalara. You can reach out to us and we'll have a detailed conversation with you around all your tax compliance needs. But ultimately, we're going to help you figure out what your challenges are and what services we can provide. And we're happy to have those conversations and help people deal with sales tax. It's something everyone has to do. It's not always the funnest part of being an online seller, but we're here to help you all out. So with that, Courtney, maybe I'll throw it back to you and we can take a quick look at some of the questions we have.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Patrick. So for our next slide, I am actually, we do have some time at the end here for Q&A. So if you do have any questions, feel free to submit those in that Q&A box. But while we're diving into questions, I did want to put up just a quick poll question. So if you are interested in learning more from Avalara, especially as it relates to Avalara for Shopify, go ahead and select yes on this poll question. And we will prioritize you and get someone in touch with you as soon as we can to answer any questions that you have about this integration and how it can work for you. So first question here, and I'll leave this poll question up on the slide here just for a minute, but we just received one. So this person says, we're already using Avalara in the Shopify tax settings. Is this a new version or an app, or might we already be using it unknowingly?
Sure, I can take that. So this is a new application. If you are already using Avalara's legacy Shopify Plus integration, you're in a good place from a tax compliance standpoint. There's no need for you to take any action at this time. However, if there is an interest in some of these new features and functionalities, this is a new app that you can purchase directly from Avalara. So you can reach out directly to our group to have that discussion, or you can contact your representatives at Shopify. That is, I guess I should clarify, if you are using the legacy app, you would not be able to find the app in your tax settings today. So you do need to reach out to Avalara Shopify to have that discussion. Megan, I guess anything you would add from that standpoint?
No, yeah, that's right. Reach out to Avalara. If you do need to get in touch with Shopify, you could reach out to your MSM if you have one, or just our general support, and that would ultimately get you the answer you need as well.
Perfect.
Great.
Thanks.
And then speaking of getting in touch with Avalara, what is the best way for people to do that?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of ways. Probably the simplest way is to go to avalara.com/Shopify, and we have a lead form right there that is dedicated to our Shopify ecosystem, and we'll get you in touch with our Shopify specialists to have a conversation.
Great. Okay.
Perhaps we should put that webpage in the chat for reference.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We can add that and send that out to all the people who are attending today. I see another question in the chat. Someone's asking about tax holidays. So what exactly are tax holidays, and does this new integration support those?
Yeah, it's a great question. So tax holidays are ultimately part of the product taxability piece, but what it is, days of the year where some products are not taxed. We see this, great example is back to school. We're heading into August right now. There's a bunch of tax holidays for things like school supplies right now in certain states. And using Avalara tax codes, we have all that logic built in. So if you're selling school supplies and it's on one of these tax holidays here in August, we know that on this date, that item is not taxable and we won't tax it accordingly. So there's a variety of different types of tax holidays, but that's just one of them. But it is all built into the Avalara product taxability logic that we have.
Got it. And maybe another question to add on to that. I see another one in the chat here about just tax changes in general. So rate changes, I think you touched a little bit on that, Patrick. Does Avalara support those as well, kind of in real time, or how does that work?
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the idea behind this, is that Avalara, we have a relationship with all the government entities. We make sure that our tax rates and rules are up to date. We work very closely with them so that anytime a change goes into effect, that happens on that day. Our customers don't need to know about it. For instance, if a rate might increase by a fraction of a percent on July 1st, that simply happens automatically in our AvaTax engine. That research is kept up to date. And then when our customers are pinging the tax engine, it's already up to date. That rate will be automatically calculated. There's no need for any interaction on the customer or the merchant side. That's really what Avalara does. We make sure that all those rates and rules are kept up to date in our tax engine.
Perfect. Okay. Great to know. Is there a reason for anyone to reach out to Shopify? So we talked about reaching out to Avalara to get the new app and learn more about it. Is there any need to get in touch with Shopify about this?
Not immediately. Again, Megan mentioned if you have an MSM, you can reach out to them with any questions you have. For the most part, now that Avalara owns and builds and sells this app directly, you would start with Avalara, and then we work very closely with Shopify and their team as needed. But for the most part, you can start by reaching out to Avalara, and we work closely with Shopify, and we have resources there to help. But most of this can be taken care of on our side, so it's best to start with.
Perfect. Okay.
And I think just to add, that would go go along with support questions as well, not just.
Noted. Okay. And then I see one last question in the chat here, and you've talked about this, but maybe just a reiteration. Where can folks find that new Avalara app within Shopify?
Yeah, so again, it's in the Shopify platform. It's in your admin settings. So if you go to settings in the bottom left corner of your Shopify product, you'll see that panel, and we are under taxes and duties. So right where you click on taxes and duties, that will pull up. You'll be able to see your tax apps, and Avalara for Shopify will be right there. Again, this is not in the App Store. It is within the Shopify product.
Yep, good call out. All right, I don't see any additional questions in the Q&A, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up. If anyone listening does have any additional questions, do feel free to submit those as I'm doing this wrap up, and we can get to those. Like I mentioned with this poll question, if you are interested in learning more about Avalara for Shopify or just Avalara in general, tax automation in general, go ahead and select yes on this poll question, and we will get someone in touch with you to answer any questions that you have. And then I also wanted to remind everyone, those additional resources on the console are still available. So if you didn't click on them before and there's one that you would want to check out, go ahead and do that now so you don't lose access. However, we did record today's session. We will send out a link to the recording. So you will have access to the same console again. So if you miss anything, want to listen to the presentation again, you'll have access to all of these links, and you are more than welcome to share it with anyone in your organization that you think might find this useful. So Megan or Patrick, any additional kind of conclusion remarks from either of you before we end?
No, thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we're really excited to be participating in Shopify tax platform.
Yeah, thank you so much for attending.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate your time, and be on the lookout for the on-demand recording in the next 24 hours. Everyone have a great day.